Sometimes life gives us lemons. Sometimes it gives us lemonade. Other times it gives us something entirely out of left field that makes us say, WTF. But no matter what obstacles come, there is most often a way out on the other side, and we are once again victorious. My name is Dr. Rowe, and you are listening to my podcast about resilience. Every guest shares a tragedy to triumph story to give listeners like you the inspiration to push through every single day. Listen now as my next guest shares how they were Lifejacked.
What do you do when your family suffers from a curse of generational trauma? My name is Dr. Rowe, and this is Lifejacked, the Resilience Podcast. Lifejacked is when an unfortunate or unplanned event happens to jack with your life. My guest for this week, Brett Cotter, will share his story of how he broke the chains of generational emotional trauma. Brett is the trauma specialist for Meditation Magazine's teacher training program. He regularly speaks at the Self-Care Summit and World Wellness Weekend. Brett is certified by the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress, accredited by the International Mindfulness and Meditation Alliance, and his core method is certified by the American Institute of Stress. Currently, Brett teaches weekly on Zoom and certifies students in the Stress is Gone method. Brett is the author of 3 Keys to Managing PTSD and the founder of Stress is Gone. He has over 20 years experience helping thousands of people recover from the most traumatic events of their lives. In this episode, he will share a little bit about his life journey of healing and share a few tips on managing stress in our own lives. Hi, Brett. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Dr. Rowe, it's such an honor to be with you, and I'm so excited to be able to talk about this topic with you.
Now, you come from a family that has experienced quite a bit of pain. Could you please share a bit of that to the listeners?
Yeah. So my family background, I'll start with my father's side. So when he was a very young boy, his mother committed suicide in the basement. She hung herself. And his father became kind of a nasty drunk. So he grew up with that, and then he went to Vietnam when he was 18. And he had like 2.5 weeks to go left on his tour, which was complete hell. And his brother passed away. His oldest brother had died in a car accident. So they let him fly back for the funeral, which he missed it by 1 day. And then the government made him go back to finish out his 2 weeks. And he felt for certain that he wasn't coming home after that. He felt he was going back there to die. One quick thing that happened to him when he was in Vietnam, he got jungle rot on his foot from getting caught in a booby trap, and he was cutting it out for like 3 to 4 weeks so he could stay in the jungle with his platoon. He was a machine gun operator, and he took his job very seriously. And it got so bad that he had to leave for medical leave. So when he left, he came back in about 4 to 5 days, and his entire platoon was wiped out. The entire platoon was gone, all the guys in it. So when the government told him he had to go back there, he really thought he wasn't coming home, and that was the first 18 and a half years of my dad's life. On my mother's side, her ancestors came over from Italy, and when I think it was her great-grandmother left, there was said to be a curse put on them for leaving the village. It was someone that was unhappy with them leaving. So they get here to the Boston area, Everett to be exact, and this curse, lo and behold, people in their family started getting cancer and dying of cancer. My mom's mother died when my mom was 15 of cancer. And then when my mom was 40, my Aunt Cheryl died in 1990. She battled cancer for 10 years. But a lot of people in her side of the family died of cancer. And there was this thing like, a curse. Lo and behold, later on, many years later, we find out that there was a corporation that was using a lake that they would all swim in Everett as a chemical dumping ground. So a lot of people that, were there ended up dying of cancer that were swimming in that lake. So my parents got together right after my dad got back from Vietnam. They lived around the corner from each other. So my mother knew of my father's family history and stuff like that. And when they got together, my father had a lot of PTSD. He was a very kind of like quiet type of kid growing up. But then when he got back from Vietnam, he was just really wound up. And then when he was a firefighter in New York City, he got into the whole party scene, and a lot of the guys coped with their PTSD through drug abuse, alcohol, partying. So then my mother divorced him when I was 6. And that's where my pain began, because that's when he left the house. So that's kind of where my story kind of began, that divorce. So do you have any questions or anything more you want to hear about that?
Yeah, I was going to kind of run that back for the guest. So dad's side, your grandmother committed suicide, your grandfather, alcoholic. Your father served in Vietnam, got jungle rot. His whole platoon was wiped out. And then your uncle passed away, and he wasn't able to say goodbye. So there's 2 people, I guess, he can't say goodbye to, because I'm assuming, he wasn't able to essentially say goodbye to his mother. And then on your mother's side, there's this curse of cancer, even though y'all found out it's because they were swimming in a lake full of chemicals. But still, I know that's definitely traumatic. You've got family member after family member dying from cancer. And then, of course, the stress of people not being supportive of them leaving from Italy to come to the United States. And I guess now they're considered outcasts, right? And then your parents divorced at age 6. Wow. That's a lot, Brett.
Yeah.
You say that when your parents divorced at 6, and so that more cycle, or like that the cycle continues once you were age 6 and kind of going into your life.
Oh, yeah. It had huge effects on me. So in the beginning, I was just sad and heartbroken and waiting on the front stoop, crying every weekend for my father to come. But he wouldn't come. And then eventually the tears, the sadness, turned to anger. And then I had a major anger issue in my teens and in my 20s. And then how it flipped in how I was relating to women after a girl would get close to my heart after maybe 18 months of being in a relationship, I would become extremely jealous. So that's actually what brought me to the whole spiritual path, right? And the whole idea of stress relief. So fast forward to when I was 27, living in California, learning how to meditate, I sought out a healer. I sat down with this healer for 90 minutes. And in the first 5 minutes, cellular memories of when I was 5 popped up, and I was actually in the memory. I was on the carpet that we had in the house when I was 5. The furniture was the same. My father and mother were fighting in the middle of the living room, and I was watching them fight, and it was exactly the same way that I argued with all of my girlfriends. My mother was yelling. Her arms were going wild, kind of like her arms are kind of like flailing around. My father was clenching his fists and grinding his teeth and yelling. And that's what I was doing in all of my fights, in all my arguments with my girlfriends, in all of my jealous rages. So when that memory came to the surface, and that was in the first 5 minutes of this quote-unquote spiritual healing session, right? All the jealousy started to unlock from my body. It was like chambers were unlocking within my chest, my heart, my ribs, my stomach, even down my legs. Once the jealousy released, then it was like pure anger and rage was underneath that. Once that released, it was a ton of sadness. Once that released, I was with the fear of abandonment. And that's what my father had experienced when he was 5 or 6 when his mother left. So this was, a very deep pattern, that was passed down from my father to me. And there were times that he would even refer to as, as like a Cotter curse. And he would say it like when I was a teen. I never asked him, like, what is it? What do you really think it is? I never really asked him what it was. I always guessed it had to do with alcohol and anger and things like that, and how we related to women. So that spiritual healing session in 90 minutes unlocked and released the fear of abandonment, which was underneath all of my issues. And
Wow.
when that released, it was just waves of unconditional love that I was feeling for myself. And that kind of reset and repatterned the inside of my being, and it just reverberated out from the center line of my body.
It's amazing the memories that we hold on to, whether they're, conscious or subconscious, that we have in our minds from the environment that we are in. And I commend you for going to see a healer so that those memories can be unlocked and essentially release you. So if there was someone else who has these traumatic memories, whether they know they have them or not, how can someone effectively deal with traumatic memories and work towards their own healing?
Yeah, so in my book that I wrote in 2015 for veterans, it's called The 3 Keys to Managing PTSD. You could get it on Amazon. It's a workbook. It has a year of exercises in it. And there's a technique in there. We now call it the TMR technique, traumatic memory release. And we use our most basic relaxation technique to release the pain and the fear and the anxiety from the traumatic memory. So veterans and first responders and people from all walks of life, they use this technique on flashbacks, nightmares, and when they know they have a traumatic memory, like when they were growing up, something that might have happened with one of their parents, or if they were in an accident, or it could be something that happened even as recently as during the pandemic, right? So the base tool, the first thing I have people practice and master is called stress stopper breath work. Whenever you're stressed out, you just touch the tension with your right hand. You start breathing deeply and slowly, and then once per breath, you silently say, "I'm okay." And within 2 minutes, the tension is going to release from your body. Once that happens, your mind becomes clear again, and your emotions calm. So those 3 steps, again, touch, breathe, and then you use the "I'm okay" mantra. Those 3 steps are highly effective. That technique was certified by the American Institute of Stress in 2012. And what we do to use it to work with traumatic memories is, let's say you have a traumatic memory with your dad and it's affecting how you relate to men, right? And you want to work on it. So let's say you remember what the most, upsetting memory is from your childhood, and you lay down, you put one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly button, you start doing stress stopper breath work to get really relaxed, usually 3 to 4 minutes, you get really relaxed, and then you bring that memory to mind. Once the memory comes into mind, you're going to have an area of your body that's going to become tense. Usually it's your stomach, solar plexus, or your heart, or your throat. You're going to move your hands there, both hands. And you're going to start breathing deeply and slowly into that area. Once the tension starts to dissipate and your body starts to relax again while you're thinking of the memory, then you're going to actually go into the memory and have the perspective from inside your body, from like what you actually saw. And the tension is going to come up again, and then you're going to play the memory out. Once the memory gets to a very stressful part, you're going to pause it. And then you're going to start breathing deep and slow, and out loud you're going to say, "I'm okay," once per breath, and you're going to see yourself inside the memory doing the technique. So you're changing the imprint within the memory. Right? We can't go back in history and actually change the event in history, but you can change the emotional imprint on a memory, because your cells don't know the difference between what you're imagining and what is happening in reality, in our world. So when you close your eyes and you imagine something, your cells think that's actually happening. So what happens is you're going into that past memory and you're breathing deeply and slowly. And once per breath, you're silently saying, I'm okay, but you're imagining yourself is doing it inside the memory. And then you let the memory play out until the end of the memory. And you release all of the tension, trauma, and anxiety from it. Now, that's be challenging to do when you're on your own doing it. So that's why it's like a process of getting really good with stress stopper breath work. And then you start to apply it to the pains of the past and the fears of the future.
That sounds like a wonderful technique, and I will definitely have to try that out. Now, most times when we think about stress, we think about it from a first person or first-hand experience, right? I'm going through stress at my job. I'm going through stress with life. I'm going through stress with money. And it's a very personal experience that we're going through. But you have brought up another person or another experience of stress, rather, of the secondhand stress, that we can experience secondhand stress. Can you kind of share with the listeners, what is secondhand stress?
It's just like secondhand smoke. It's when someone is in your environment and they're really stressed out, and then it affects you. There's not too much science on this, but researchers do agree that stress is contagious. And there actually was a pretty cool study in Germany at the Max Planck Institute. It said 26% of people became stressed just from observing someone who was stressed. And then get this, the number jumps to 40% if that person you're observing that's stressed is a romantic partner. So just think about this. You know, you come home, you're in a fine mood, but your spouse is upset about something and they're very upset. How long does it take for you to get stressed? So that's what secondhand stress is.
Yeah, for sure. You can definitely feel that. I mean, because the mood is off, right? There's tension in the air. You feel like you have to walk on eggshells because your partner is upset, and you don't want to upset them further. For sure.
And then think about when you do get into a stressful situation with a loved one, right? A spouse, child, parent, sibling, whoever. It never starts at exactly the same moment for both people. Like, you don't start fighting at the same time. Somebody always starts it. Right? It's like the great debate. Who started it? You started it, right? But if you think about it, someone does start it, because someone gets triggered inside, and then it turns into a behavior, and then that other person reacts to that behavior, and it's a sequence like dominoes. It's a chain reaction, right? So I feel like in the next 10 to 20 years, this whole idea of secondhand stress and the other person, right, who would be receiving the secondhand stress, it's really about that person really embodying their consciousness and creating more space. So we've been working on, tools for that. Because if you think about stress in general, like stress at work, stress here, it is a chain reaction from person to person to person to person, because our cells are connected subconsciously.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Now, how can individuals address generational stress in their own families? How can we recognize it and then stop repeating this cycle to not pass it down to the next generation?
So there are many cycles of stress. In my new book, I look at 4, but there are many, many cycles of stress, not just generational stress. And what I say is, don't get lost going down the rabbit hole. You want to understand enough of your family history so you could see, where is it affecting me, right? And how's it affecting me? So I didn't connect the dots until I was 27. I knew I had a jealousy problem, but I didn't know anything about the fear of abandonment. I never put it together with my father losing his mother when he was, 6, 5 and going on 6, losing his source of unconditional love, as a child. So you want to understand it from how it's affecting you and your behavior, right? And I always say, look at your biggest trigger. Become really conscious of your biggest trigger. Who is it or what is it? For some people, it's anxiety on Sunday night or Monday morning going to work. For some people, it's their spouse. Some people, it's their parent, their siblings, their kids. Who is it? What is it? When does it most often occur? This is huge because stress is tricky. It's like a snake jumping up and biting us in the back of the calf. But it's really not, because it's right in front of us. We get surprised by it, like we don't see it. I want people to front load it. So if you have an issue with your boss every Thursday at 4 o'clock, front load that. That's going to happen in that meeting. So spend some time in meditation to bring some foresight of how you can respond for the greatest good of everyone involved. So the idea is you want to stop doing the chemical karmic dance with your trigger. It's so important to understand that our triggers are our teachers. So I would really start there with your biggest trigger. So my whole path started, again, when I was 27, when I was working on my biggest trigger, jealousy. Ruined relationship after relationship after relationship. I was becoming aware of my cycles and patterns. So start to become aware of your cycles and patterns, and where does your biggest stressor sit? Where does it live? What does it do? What does it say? And how does it affect you? Our bodies are almost like marionette puppets with all these buttons we have and all these automatic reactions we have. And our soul's in this body, and when we get stressed, the body's consciousness takes over our soul's awareness. And that's when we overreact.
Now, I want to shift a little bit. And so you had an interesting experience, and you had an encounter with a 35th generation Shaolin master. Can you kind of tell the listeners about this experience? First of all, what is a Shaolin master, right, for our listeners out there who have no idea what that is?
Yeah, so he is a Cam Yuen, Kamyuen. He was a 35th generation Shaolin grandmaster from China. And when he was growing up, he was in the temples, going through the kung fu practices and sparring and stuff. And he noticed when he was a little boy that he could see a weakness inside of a person. It was like a little dark patch. Let's say it might be their kidney or in their stomach. And he would just start attacking that dark spot, and he would win every fight. As he became older, he decided that if he could break someone down with that weakness, maybe he could build them up and strengthen the weakness. So then he created his own healing technique, which he called Chinese energetic medicine. And I took 2 levels of training with him in 2000 and 2001. And it was profound. It was profound. What he taught me was how to align my conscious, subconscious, and superconscious mind to facilitate healing. And he was incredible. He was truly incredible. So he was a martial artist, and he was a really talented, gifted, and just like on a different level as a healer.
So the listeners can kind of understand stress, because we think we know what it is. It's the pressure that we feel, and the headaches that we get, and the worry that comes with that. But with really understanding stress, can you kind of explain like how it can really affect us, and in what ways does it affect us? Because I don't know if people really understand how bad stress is. Like, I think people use it as, I'm stressed out, I'm so stressed out, but not understanding that stress it's a killer, as they say, the silent killer. So can you kind of explain a little bit about stress?
Yeah, so heart disease is still the number 1 cause of death in our country. And stress, they say, is like a proxy killer, because stress is an incredibly large contributor to heart disease. There was a study in England in the 90s that said that unmanaged stress reactions was a higher risk factor for cancer than smoking cigarettes and eating high cholesterol foods. Stress to me is just a reaction, perception of danger. It's fueled by fear, and it's perpetuated by worrisome thoughts. And every time we get stressed, 1,400 reactions cascade throughout our body, mind, and emotions.
Wait, did you say 1,400?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And that process is only healthy for us in true life and death scenarios. So if you think about it, how many times a day do you get stressed? Before the pandemic, the average person had 52 stress reactions in the average day in our country. Right? Most of those are small and go unnoticed, but still it's a stress reaction. So if you think about your stress, even in the last 10 years, how many of those stress reactions were because your life was in danger in that moment? So if you are walking, right. So like if you're walking,
it may feel that way,
in the
though.
street,
It does. But no.
I know it does feel that way. It's crazy. So if you're walking across the street and you hear a loud horn to your left, you turn and a bus is barreling down at you, and then you jump back 8 feet somehow to get onto the hood of a car and avoid being squashed like a bug. That was a great stress reaction, right? That was perfect. That was your body doing its job.
Right.
All the other ones have to do with the amount of fear that we've built up in our fearful core beliefs and how we see the world and how fearful we are seeing ourselves in the world. That is what attributes to most of our stress. So stress is just a reaction to a perception, ding, ding, of danger. Key right there. You could break up the stress by reducing the fear, by healing the trauma in your body. So that's why I've focused my work greatly in the last 20 years on trauma recovery, because I found that when we heal the original traumatic memories during our formative years, that's when our resiliency goes through the roof, because we're no longer afraid.
So I love that you mentioned resilience. So what are some of your core beliefs or principles that can help build resilience in the face of adversity?
So my core central beliefs that I have introduced and nourished and cultivated in the center of my being is all I am is life force energy. And I am eternal. So my identity is not with this body. I care for the body. I love the body. My role is to understand my body and let love seep into every nook and cranny of tension and fear inside my body. That's my relationship with my body. I love it unconditionally. That's my karma as a soul, because the body has my path for me. The lessons I'm going to learn to unconditionally loving all the issues that are trapped in this body. And that's how I break free. So I identify with the part of me that is one in eternity, not the part of me that's going to die in the temporary. And that brings my resiliency to a whole nother stratosphere. And then one thing I like to do is approach big things as if they're small. Approach the big things as if they're small. And another thing that I like, being an entrepreneur, my day is not like I punch a clock, I do a job that I'm not passionate about. I leave, I come home, I don't think about it. My day is, pushing myself to work on my next book, to schedule the next retreat, to fill the next retreat, to do lives, to introduce the work to people. So I have to push through, those inner blocks that would normally hold me back from doing that. And it's those core beliefs of not identifying with the body, but identifying with my own life force energy and coming from a place of waking up. So have you ever realized that you were dreaming when you were in a dream?
Yes, a few times.
Okay. So when that happens for me, the dream becomes so much fun, and I usually just start flying. Because I'm like, what do I want to do? I know I'm dreaming. I'm like, oh, awesome, I'm dreaming. I'm just going to fly. So bringing that kind of childlike, limitless action to this life. Like we always tell ourselves, no, I can't do that. I don't have time for that. I can't do this. Just doing it, going with my inspiration. So creating momentum with my inspiration and just doing what I want to do, service. And then usually things end up okay.
So I know you shared a couple of techniques previously throughout this conversation, but do you have any specific techniques, without giving away any of your secrets, because I want people to contact you for sure, but do you have any specific techniques or practices you recommend for reducing stress? Maybe just one or two.
Yeah, no. So I don't keep any secrets when it comes to stress relief. There's too many stressed out people out there. So I everything I can to share it and scream it from the rooftops. So stress stopper breath work is what you want to marry to your biggest trigger. Right? You want to marry stress stopper breath work to your biggest trigger. And we have an app, the Stress Is Gone app and PTSD free, which you answer a few questions and then your app predicts 3 minutes ahead of your stress. And then it guides you through the breath work. So I think it's super important to practice stress stopper breath work when you're going to bed at night. Put one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly button. You lay down, close your eyes, start breathing deep and slow. Once per breath, silently say, I'm okay. And if you have another mantra you want to say the other mantra. All of my affairs are in divine order. I am eternal. Whatever you want to say. I'm okay. If you just lost a loved one, this is a really good one to practice. I'm okay here, and she's okay over there. Or if the person that you lost was a male, I'm okay here, and he's okay over there. After like a month or two, it reframes the relationship energetically, where you could actually start to open your heart when you're thinking about them. And it makes it easier to connect with them energetically. So a lot of people that have lost loved ones, I use that kind of technique with them. And then I just think of our biggest stressors. We want to walk towards everything we ran from with our breath and with our touch. And we let that breath move through the inside of the body, like getting a massage from the inside out. And you actually focus the breath to move through the centermost point of the tension, and it starts to unwind, lock, and release. It's natural, and it's easy, and it takes minutes. So often we'll reach outside of ourselves, but it's just a matter of guiding the breath into the tension, and it unwinds like a ball of yarn right in front of you, and you witness it. And it's a very powerful technique to master. And then we have a technique that I'll share really quick about anxiety. This technique I created about 6 months into the pandemic when I started hearing all these stories about nurses and doctors, just in the parking lot and crying before and after work because they were so overwhelmed by a tsunami of stress from the pandemic. And then they would go home and their kids would have issues and they had to deal with that. So I created the anxiety freedom technique. And basically all you got to do is write out everything that's stressing you out. And then you list it out and you circle the biggest one, the one that's causing you the most stress. And then you ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario of this situation? Write down the worst case scenario. And then you say, what is my biggest fear about that worst case scenario? Now you just surfaced within about 45 seconds the core fear your subconscious is freaking out about, that it's tormenting your cells over. When you become conscious of the core fear, the whole anxiety mechanism is going to start to unlock and release from your chest. And then we have a whole technique called the freedom statement. And then you start breathing into that tension, and then you command it to unlock and release. And what I found is when you have your core fear on the table or an original traumatic memory on the surface, you're consciously sitting with it, you can command energetically the unlocking and releasing of all the tension and the trauma from inside your body. And if you want to put it on steroids, you could use the name of the higher power that you prefer. And you command that higher power to shine light through it, unlock it and release it, and you feel the fear melt out of your body. So that is the anxiety freedom technique. So a lot of these techniques, they're very grounded in the body, But then as you get further along and you start to practice the technique, it opens up a whole new spiritual reality of what we actually are. And it kind of sets us in proper mind, body, and spirit alignment. Because right now we're all identified with the body, and our bodies are full of stress. So we're kind of like painted ourselves into a corner. This gets us out of that corner. It allows you to walk right out of it. And now you have a tool for stress and anxiety and healing traumatic memories.
Well, Brett, I wish I could just continue asking you question after question after question, because this is such a great topic and you have such a wealth of knowledge. And I really appreciate you being a guest on my show and sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge and experience with the listeners. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you. Can you do me a favor and take the time to let everyone know how they can either participate in one of your weekly Zoom classes or purchase a copy of any of your books?
Yeah. So, and before I get into that, I just want to thank you so much for having me on. And I just love your questions, and I just felt it was really synergistic. So thank you so much for having me on. The book for PTSD that is entitled The 3 Keys to Managing PTSD, that's on Amazon by Brett Cotter. It's a blue cover. You'll see that there. It's for $22. You get the hardcover book, and you could write in. It has a year of exercises in there. Our online system, we have a whole membership. So I teach, and my wife teaches 6 times a week in our membership. So it's like 25-minute classes once a day, and it's all around relaxing the body and energizing the body. And then we have a 20-minute class that's on Wednesday nights, and then we have once a month a workshop where we're actually doing laser coaching and helping people release trauma and anxiety and pain from their body. And we do that live. So the membership is $15 a month, and you end up getting, I think it's 24 live experiences each month, with us. And what I found is the easiest way to change is to look at your daily schedule and change something there. Because if your behavior doesn't change, you ain't changing. And the easiest way to change your behavior is to go onto your calendar on your phone or on your computer and just say at 7:30 in the morning, I'm meditating for 20 minutes. And if you can't do it then at 5:30 in the morning, I'm meditating, or at lunch. You have to find the time, and if a single mom with 4 kids can get all of her kids to practice and to school and have 2 jobs, you can make 20 minutes to meditate. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. And I want to leave your listeners with this. Meditators have an 87% less hospitalization rate for heart disease than non-meditators. Heart disease is still the number 1 killer in our country. That science has been out there for 35 years. How many of us know that? Not a lot, right? So, answer, and the answer and the fountain of youth is we're sitting on it. It's our butt. Just sit down and freaking meditate. There's a lot of amazing stats on how your cells become 10 to 12 years biologically younger than your actual age after 5 years of meditating. So meditation is rejuvenating our cells. So I'm a very big proponent. It's actually the 3rd key in the book, The 3 Keys to Managing PTSD. The first one is learn how to stop a stress reaction. The second one is process the trauma. And the 3rd key is meditate every day. So the Army put out a really cool study. It said after 8 weeks of meditating, veterans diagnosed with PTSD cut their symptoms in half. In 8 weeks, 1 meditation a day. So this is the way forward. This is really the way forward. And I encourage everybody to approach the big things as if they're small and practice stressed upper breath work at night and use the Stress Is Gone app during the day so that you can marry your biggest trigger with the breath work. And it's not about the trigger, that person, place, or thing. It's about the trauma underneath it that manifested it. We have the tools to help you build that as well. So my final message is just that you can do it. Anyone could do this. Anyone that's alive, there's two things. Anyone that's alive is going to have stress, and anyone that's alive can breathe. So we're just marrying the touch, the breath, and the mantra, right? Those three layers. And it's like a 1, 2, 3 knockout punch for stress. So I encourage everyone to play with that. It works.
Well, Brett, thank you so much for the last words of encouragement for the listeners, your advice, your wisdom. I really appreciate you. And yes, like you said, changing the behavior. As they say, if you do what you've always done, then you'll get what you've always gotten. So, but I wish you and your family nothing but blessings and abundance. Please take care.
Much for having me on, Dr. Rowe. I appreciate you, your path, your passion, and your wisdom as well. For having me on.
Hey, are you really loving this podcast, or did you really enjoy this week's episode? Then please subscribe, like, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. And remember to live, laugh, love, learn, and then repeat. See you in the next episode.